forward and speak or read or play music in part of this remembrance. Let us pray. O God of grace and glory, we remember before you this day our sister Nan Lyon, and thank you for giving her to us, her family and friends, to know and to love as a companion on our earthly pilgrimage. In your mercy, console all who mourn. We praise you for Anne and for the great company of all whom, having finished their course in life, now rest from their labors. We praise you for Anne's love and care for all people, especially the young, the disenfranchised, those who are marginalized and whose human dignity is abused by injustice, selfishness, and discrimination. We give thanks for Anne and all those who have stood up to advocate and demand justice, opportunity, and liberty for all your people. To all of these, grant your peace. Let light perpetual shine upon them, and help us to know that at death, life is changed, not ended. Bring us at last with them into the joy of your home, not made with hands, but eternal in the heavens. Amen. It's my privilege now to introduce Dr. Robert Scott, Professor Emeritus of the Pennsylvania State University, friend and fellow advocate for racial equality and education. And Dr. Scott will deliver a message about Anne's life and achievements.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Bishop McNutt. I really am a little nervous because I thought about her all night and early morning because she was such a dear friend. We met years ago. I was one of the students in the 60s that sat at the lunch counters in Greensboro. And I recall I had the pleasure of also meeting Rosa Parks. She came to our campus to talk about the civil rights issue. And I recall one thing that Rosa Parks said at that time. She was talking about Virginia Durr, Anne's mother. One of her famous statements was that Rosa Parks said to Virginia Durr, "We have a long way to go, but because of people like you, you made the road a lot easier." I'll never forget that. It gave me goosebumps as I have it now, thinking about those words. In my years, even during that time of the civil rights movement, it was very difficult for me, born and raised in Reading. My father did a lot of missionary work, helped to bring the churches together in Reading. So I was brought up in that environment where my neighbors on one side were Jewish and Italian on the other side. I thought that's the way the world was until I left Reading and I went in the Marine Corps and found that the whole issue of diversity and human rights was quite different. But during those years, and then later on when I met Nan Lyon, I was just moved. And I, of course, read the book that was written. All the stories that was told in that book were just marvelous about, her family, her children, and what her mother and dad did. In many of the presentations that I've been privileged to do, I spoke about that family in the South. And the workshops that Ann and I have done during the years are really interesting. As Walter knows, we used to talk about this whole concept of looking at civil rights, as one program was titled, through the lens of the Northern African-American student and a white Southern family. And at one program we did at Hershey a few years ago, I heard one person in the audience, he didn't know I was sitting next to him, that I was one of the presenters. He says, "What does that white woman know about civil rights?" And after she spoke, I went over to him and said, "Do you know now?" He said, "Oh my God." So again, people don't know, because Anne was what I call one of those silent warriors. She really was. Very humble, never boasted or bragged about what she was going to do. But the stories she could tell, I mean, it was amazing. We never had enough time in the programs. But during the years, and I went back today reflecting on some of the things the family was well known for. Here you had her father, again, prominent white attorney in the South, Montgomery, a champion for civil rights. A lot of persons don't understand. It was difficult for us as students of color, but for persons who were white, battling injustice, they were really hated and scorned more than anyone I could tell, excuse me, at that time. One of the students who sat with us at the lunch counters in Greensboro, young Jewish lady from New York, just amazing talent, very bright. They would arrest us for anything, anything. One of my jobs was helping to take some of the students to the lunch counters to sit. And this one young lady was arrested along with us. He said, "We will not put you in jail if you tell us," and apologize for this term, "if you tell us that that nigger there raped you." And this young student said, "No, I won't do that." So they put in a cell right next to us. There were 3 of us in the one cell. And they put our other student in the cell next to us. She put her in a cell with 2 individuals who were white. They were there for drunkenness and disorderliness. All 3 of them raped her in that cell. I don't want to share just negative things. But the concern that I always had, these were the unsung heroes. People never heard about all those persons who paid the price, like the Durr family, the Lyon family. They never hear about that. They hear about the champions, of course, whether it was Dr. King or what have you. And even Dr. King said, because he was our mentor, of course, during the city movements, he continued to talk about the Durr family, Lyon family, because they knew the remarkable achievements they made. So I really am humbled and proud to be part of this celebration for my good friend Anne, because she truly is, not was, is a champion, because she should live in the hearts of all of us for what she has done. In the years she was at Harrisburg Community College, she touched the hearts and minds of so many persons. Dr. King used to tell us it wasn't so important how many people remember you, but how many people you've made a difference in their lives, and that was Anne, the students she's touched during the years. And we would do workshops together. Anne had all her slides, as Walt knows, picking up some of them slides from your house. She had bought, I says, "Anne, we only have 2 hours." But she had such a story to tell. She had amazing stories to tell of her life and her life of her parents and what she had to go through from Birmingham to Montgomery to Northern Virginia and Pennsylvania. Let me share this with you very quickly before I forget. When Anne's mother was in a nursing facility over here in the West Shore, at that time, Anne was saying that, Mama didn't even recognize me because of the deterioration. But I'd go in, I'd touch her hand, and we'd talk a little bit, and she said Mama would smile. And the administrator of the nursing facility said to her one day, he says, "Your mother is something else." Now here, her mother said to the administrator, "I don't understand why you don't have any black staff here or black residents." So human rights is in the soul, it's not in the mind. If you're not touched by that, you're not living. And that was Anne. No matter what you did or what she talked about, you could feel the passion in her heart. But going back and look at the years that she has made such a big difference, I look at her not only as a scholar, which she was, not only as a very competent person, which she was, but her passion is non-debatable. In all those years that we worked together, and the stories she would tell, I could not remember all of them, but I remember how she touched me, and that was so important. Ann and I were doing a workshop one day together, and I share this with you because I think it's so important. She was in tears when she talked about the young people today. Don't have a clue. They're not touched about what happened in terms of the people before us. And we talked about all the persons who gave their lives, people who were killed during those early years in the civil rights movement. But Ann never, up until you were just sharing outside, Bishop McNutt, even her last breath, she was trying to organize things and want to make sure everything was in an order. But I remember that, and I share this with you because I think it's important as well. Most of us know why, when you see a funeral, why everyone should stop and pause, right? Why do we stop? Why do we, you see people so, oh, I wish that funeral would get by, I'm so upset, I got to get to my job or what have you. But you go back, really.
Bus, and I emptied out my little account, and I was going south to sit at its lunch counter. And a friend of my mother's recognized that I was there, you know, in all my glory, trying to look older. My bra stuffed because there wasn't anything in it, and I wanted to look like an older kid to do this. And they put me off the bus, and they said, your time will come. But I knew that I needed to fight, and I knew that I needed to be there where Rosa Parks was, where all the action was, where all the people were standing up. I wanted to go. So that's what Nan Lyon was part of. Her mother and father gave me the strength through their courage to be a person who would stand up. And I remember in the second grade, because I was getting really tired of racism by then, I asked my parents why they hadn't stood up in an earlier generation. I was still mad about that first grade trip. And they didn't really have a good answer. They said it was more complex than I could understand. But my father, who lived in the South, was brought up in the South, said, if you say the things you say, apparently I was a very unusual second grader in terms of racism. He said, you know, they kill children too. They hang children. And I found out later that they had hung his uncle, and he'd seen him coming home from school when he was 12 years old. And I think it greatly influenced how he dealt with his terrible system. And I remember the second grader looking up at her father and saying, then I'll die. I'll go to a cold grave, to a cool grave. I won't live like this. I'm going to fight. And I think he must have been absolutely terrified that he had birthed such a child. But his answer was, you remind me of your great-grandmother, who was known in our family for being a bit of a spitfire. And Ann and I became closer when we were both invited to talk about the history of the civil rights movement. This was in the 80s in Harrisburg, early 90s, and it was at Messiah College. And they had a series on the history of the civil rights movement. And they went and they got a couple of antiques out of the closet to be able to talk to kids about what had happened there, what it was like in Harrisburg, what it was like in Montgomery, what it was like in Atlanta. And I remember thinking, I had gone, my father took us south in I think it was 58. And that summer, I got to meet all my southern relatives. And it was great. I met my grandmother who plowed with mules, and I loved this. I was very impressed that she had her own land, and she got up in the morning and put on this straw hat, and she was 5'10", and she hit those mules, and out she went plowing. And I remember saying to her, because, you know, I was a very worldly child, Grandma, you don't have to do this hard work. You could get a tractor, and it would be easier. And I remember her saying to me, no, she said, tractors are like men. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, they're unreliable. So I watched her plow with those mules. I learned about what it was like to be in the South then. I was with some other relative, and I'd stayed at their house for 2 or 3 days, and I played with other little girls. And then it was time for me to go home, and the person who was supposed to pick me up wasn't there. It wasn't difficult to get from where they were to my aunt's house. And so I started walking down. And I noticed there's a little police car following me slowly at a distance. And then finally they stop and they say, "You there?" And I say, "Hello." And they say, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to my Aunt Maisie's house. She lives at," and I give the address. And they say, "Get in." And I'll say, "No, I'm enjoying the walk." And they say, "Get in." And I say, "I should get in." They take me there and bring me to the door. And they tell her maybe I should walk around by myself. And I'm trying to figure out what I did. I didn't say a thing, didn't do a thing. And it took me quite a while to figure out I had threatened them by my body language. I was walking free, just like I could walk on any piece of ground without challenge. Who knew? But when we went to Messiah College, I learned of Nan Lyon's personal experience with racism in America. I learned from Barton Fields, who was also with us, about his experience. Barton came from Jamaica and saw things very differently as a person of color from Jamaica. And I got to talk about Harrisburg, and I guess maybe the most important thing I ever did in Harrisburg, I did by accident. I wanted to go to the prom. Everybody wants to go to the prom. And I had a date, but 2 weeks before the prom, I didn't have a date because his father decided he should take someone who was more prominent in the community. We made arrangements to have my boyfriend's best friend take me to the prom, and that would get me there, and then from there we could work it out. We were sitting at lunch, a group of kids, and they were talking about their prom dates, and I mentioned mine, and one of the girls spilled her milk, and she said, "He's white. Your date is white." And I was like, if his parents were white, he's white. I'm going to the prom. I would have gone with a Martian. I was going to the prom. During that time, during the next 2 weeks, there was a lot of turbulence in my school. I was threatened with not passing, not getting my diploma. I was brought into the office of the meanest critter we had on campus, who was a counselor, and told that this would be disruptive. And other people said, "Well, you know, it's not going to look good." And I said, "I'm going to the prom. I need a date. Forget it." They told me that this teacher was going to keep me from going into the ballroom for the prom that night. And I got there, and it was a Holiday Inn that was set high on a hill. And we had to walk up the hill, and I remember seeing all those kids with their faces flashed up against the glass and getting there, and she was doing that George Wallace thing. And I tried to figure out how to handle her. And what I did was hug her. I embraced her. "It's so good to see you," in that waltzed her out of the way, and I was in. 2 years later, my brother was at the prom, his graduation prom, and he was sitting, my brother was a football team person. He's now at Penn State. His name is Dr. Clare Jones. Look him up. He was a coward then, and he's not much better now. But anyway, he was sitting with a friend, and the friend said, "I don't approve of interracial dating," because apparently that's what had happened in the time since I'd been there. And he said, "Some bitch named Clare Jones started this." And my brother suddenly couldn't remember who he was biologically related to. So that was one of the things I said at Messiah College. Yes. And I wanted to say that what Nan Lyons gave to me in her time was, I saw a consummate human soul. I saw a person who smiled as she took on racism, smiled when her neighbors didn't like her, smiled when she stood up for children that didn't have things, smiled as a professor. And I'm always going to remember that smile. And one last thing. When I think of Nan, I think of her as one of the righteous. I think of her as the kind of person who is surely enshrined in the best part of heaven for those who've been courageous and who've stood the test. I think when Nan went home, God was there to say, "Welcome, my good and faithful sister."
Thank you so very much for your sharing. And now we have coming to talk with us Clare Jones. Not Nan Spiers, which Clare Jones just left. Nan Spiers-Marsh, who is a good friend of Ann's, and she wants to come and talk a little bit with us. Yes, sorry about that mix-up.
Well, I knew Clare Jones back when she was Clary. I don't even know if you remember that far back, Clary. Good. Well, good morning to all of you, beloved family and friends of Anne. For all of you who know Walter and Anne's daughter, I am officially known as the other Nan. Not the daughter, just the friend, but a friend with a 40-year pedigree. I met Anne when our children were teens. I was teaching a course at Hack, and Anne, of course, was on the faculty. And gradually we found out that we had much in common. We both came from elsewhere. We both had lived in Thailand, and we were both ardent liberals. It was great fun talking to this lovely, gentle woman who came from Alabama and said words that sounded very funny to my New York ears. Still, it was what she said that surprised me and expanded my own thinking. One day she told me she was an economic determinist. I wasn't sure exactly what she meant by that, but she assured me that Kenneth Galbraith himself had convinced her. Yes, she actually had had a chat with Kenneth Galbraith on the subject. It was about then that I met Walter, on a first trip to the Clifton Road home. Walter asked me if I knew who Anne was. It was characteristic of Anne to tell nothing of her background at all, except for an occasional mysterious reference to Uncle Hugo, who turned out to be Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black, married to her mother's sister. As I reminisced after her passing, I realized more than most of us, Anne had many personas. There was Anne, the wife and homemaker, who created a happy nest for their lion cubs. But it was also a salon where she and Walter casually jammed a dozen or more people around the dinner table on Clifton Road. There was Anne, the sister, to her 3 accomplished siblings, Lucy, Tilla, and Lula. They all 4 shared the drama and hardships of parents who fought intimately and bravely for civil rights, moving from Montgomery, Alabama to Washington, D.C., and back again. There was Anne, the mother and grandmother, who never had enough wall space for her beloved children and grandchildren. There was Anne, the teacher, whose involvement in her students' lives extended way beyond the classroom. It was rare that we went anywhere together without some devoted young person stopping by to talk to her at length. There was Anne, the politico, who ran for commissioner of East Pennsboro Township. I spent many days knocking on doors with her, and after she won, I believe the other commissioners lived to regret this bull in their conservative china shop. There was also Anne, the athlete. Her sailing ability caught the eye of young Walter Lyon. Her tennis form was legend. Her graceful swimming strokes remained awesome to the end. And she taught me cross-country skiing. On bright winter days, we'd glide out her back door right onto the golf course and not return until the sun was setting. Our style wasn't elegant, but even the falling down was fun. Finally, there was Anne the Fearless. Her 65th birthday was coming up, and I suggested we throw a party. She demurred. It seemed Sister Lucy and brother-in-law Sheldon Hackney had invited her to their house in Washington. She encouraged me to drive with her and daughter Nan. On the day, I stepped through the front door of the charming Georgetown house, like Alice stepping through the looking glass. There was Art Buchwald, and there was Vernon Jordan. And wasn't that Charlene Hunter Gault? The room was full of newsmakers and celebrities. For me, it was a joyous afternoon. When it came time to leave, a small knot of women stood at the front door. There was hostess Lucy, there was Anne and Nan, and Hillary Clinton and Katharine Graham, and I. The subject was politics. I said to Hillary, they, the Republicans, are so much better at dirty tricks. As she was agreeing with me, Anne turned to Katharine Graham of the Washington Post. And she said, oh no, it's the journalists. They've become so lazy. With that, Mrs. Graham drew herself up to her considerable height and departed. Next to me, Anne chuckled, noting that Catherine and Mummy, meaning Virginia Durr, had been at odds for years. Most lives are prose journeys with ups, downs, and many plateaus. Anne Durr Lyon's life was poetry, and all of us, family and friends, constituted some of the many verses. I feel certain we will all treasure our Anne memories long after we've said our formal goodbyes. Thank you.
Thanks so very much. And now, Anne and Walter's son, Paul, will share some remembrances.
Good morning. My name's Paul Lyon. I'm the third of four of Anne and Walt's children. I'm the middle son, and like my grandfather Durr, I have four incredibly beautiful daughters. Also nearly 20 years apart in age, just like my mom and her sisters. Mom loved having sisters. My older and younger brothers were born 3 years apart to the day. Imagine, if you can, raising three rambunctious boys that close in age. It was truly a lion's den. As my dad proudly posted on our mailbox, we were a handful, feisty and fiercely competitive, to say the least. Other than taking salvation in an occasional beer at the dinner table, I'm not sure how my mother did it, but she did. She was tough stuff. She had unbelievable patience, an epic can-do attitude, and vehemently lived in what she believed. Mom was my hero. My mom was tough stuff and may have relied on a smoke now and then to make raising the boys a little easier. I'm sure she wasn't using prescription drugs. When I was about 11 or 12, my mother started an inner-city tennis program for disadvantaged kids from downtown Harrisburg. She wrote letters to Spalding and Wilson asking for donations of rackets and balls. Sure enough, the donations poured in. One night a week, she would load my brother and I into the Chevy 2, cart us over to the community college where she taught. The three of us, acting like tennis instructors, would stand at the net tapping balls to the kids. The first night, 7 or 8 showed up. The next week, nearly 20. The third week, even more. I complained, Mom, I will do this tennis thing, but only if we can take our bikes over too. The sidewalks at Hack were very smooth and flat, unlike the steep hill that we lived on. My brother and I had matching twin 10-speeds. Not that a car full of donated rackets and balls weren't enough. Mom, upon my insistence, put the seats down in the Chevy and loaded the bikes, and off we went. On the third or fourth night, as Mom closed, things suddenly went horribly wrong with Nan Lyon's Good Samaritan event. As we were gathering all the donated tennis rackets, I noticed the bikes were gone. Anne flew into action, questioning a few of the older kids to the possible accomplices. I felt like Encyclopedia Brown was nearby. Mom threw us in the station wagon. Within minutes, we were in the unlit hood of downtown Harrisburg. Anne was visibly furious. She methodically started knocking on doors. I was scared to death. I wished I'd never owned a bike and that Mom would just take us home and forget the whole thing. By the third house, Mom disappeared down a dark alley, and I just buried my head in the seat until I heard clanging coming out of the dark. In the shadows of the porch light, I see my mom's blonde hair coming out of the alley, pushing a bike with both hands over to the car. We all drove home in total silence. My mom was tough stuff. She never wavered. She never gave up. Mom was my hero. I remember a few years later asking my dad, "Why'd you marry Mom?" He thought for a while and he said, "You know the Strombus?" The Strombus was an old, bright red British Channel racing schooner that he often borrowed from Uncle Bobby. He said, "We were out sailing off Baltimore and a small squall came in. I saw some shelter ahead, and as we got the sails down and ran back to the helm, I had needed to get the bow back into the wind. Next thing I know, your mother is standing on the bow, throwing a 75-pound anchor and chain overboard, cinching it in, cleating the line tight. That's when I knew I loved your mother." Was it really the anchor, Dad? I'll let you decide. Years later, my parents were having a party at the house on 20 Clifton Road. My mom wasn't much for makeup and fashion, but when Anne turned it on with some lipstick and jewelry, the tomboy quickly went away. That night, a few older kids stole my bike from the house. I watched from behind the bushes in the driveway. Once they were out of sight, I went in the house, interrupted the party, told my mom about the crime in progress, and started to feel sorry for these boys. Without missing a beat, my mom excused herself, darted from the door in her party gala. Within minutes, I saw my mom coming up Clifton Road with my bike. The high school boys chasing behind her, begging her not to call the police. Mom was larger than life. Mom had an incredible serve. She was poetry in motion on the tennis court. She didn't wear eyeshadow, fancy clothes, or makeup. Instead, she was busy teaching me sports, to ski, on the golf course, to row in Maine, to canoe on the creek nearby, riding horses. My mom would sit in my room at night and give me ticklebacks, ask me how my day was, and help me solve life's problems that a young teenager had. I love my alone time with Mom. Mom left me with a crazy obsession that brings me more peace and relaxation than just about anything I can think of. Like my mom, I cannot stand the sight of a weed. I love to garden with my mom, and it probably started with the fact that she would pay me a penny per weed. At one point, I tried to negotiate a nickel. No go. It was just a penny. But I loved to kneel beside her and listen to her political rants. We would get our hands dirty and rid the world of varmints, dandelions, and other pesky creatures. She would ramble on passionately about injustice in the world and saving us from evildoers. Mom's passion for the party is legendary, and was even evident in her birthday cards to my daughters. There were no Disney princess cards from Granny Annie. just handwritten notes. My favorite card to Jane when she was about 7 or 8 went something like this. Brittany Ann and her sister took the card, disappeared into the other room to decipher Granny's handwriting, which is something we always had to do. Jeannie came back to the room and said, "Dad, can you explain to me the wolf behind the bush in the birthday card? I don't understand the wolf behind the bush." That was Anne. She loved her politics. One of my earlier memories of Mom was in April 1968. I was 6 years old. We had been at parent-teacher conference the day before, and I came home from school wondering why all the other kids' moms were so short. The next day, Mom came home. She was a wreck. When I asked her what was wrong, she quickly turned off the TV and told me Reverend King had been shot. She slumbered over to the kitchen and collapsed her head on top of the refrigerator and burst into tears. I'd never seen my mother cry. My mom was larger than life, and I was scared to see her like that, so I kept thinking to myself, so my hero is taller than a refrigerator. I finally understood why all the other mothers were so short. Mom stood tall. She was larger than life. She was my rock. Mom, like her mother before her, never hesitated to jump in and stir things up, inspire people's ways of thinking. Like Rosa Parks, Mother was never afraid to speak her mind. Hell no, Anne was not one to go quietly to the back of the bus. She told it like it was, and I miss her already. My mom was my protector. She loved me unconditionally. She loved fighting injustice, the wind in her face. My mom was an angel in disguise. And finally, she is right where she should be. Here's to Mom. This is a poem that Jane Durr Lyon, my 18-year-old daughter who's at the University of Oregon, wrote about her grandmother, and she asked me to read it to you very quickly. You took me to the beach. You were as tall as the stars, yelling like a lady, driving old-fashioned cars. You smoked Virginia Slims because you are tougher than a man, pink lipstick on your mouth, and magic fingers on your hand. You could ramble one for hours and days talking about the South and the civil rights movement ways. So much life you had lived, though I still had more questions for you. Always very stern. You, like your old-fashioned ways, gave me antique jewelry on every birthday, and he won you on a boat, sailing in the wind, salty air in your face, salty water on your pale skin. And that night in February, when I had to say goodbye, I whispered that I loved you, and I tried not to cry. But the thing that shook me, that I couldn't get through, is that after 18 years of asking, I still had more questions for you. I love you, Jane. Thank you.
Paul, thank you so very much. And now daughter Nan will share some of her memories with her mom.
That's hard to follow, just because that's worth, some tears. I'm the beautiful daughter, ... that needs to lose weight. But I'm the beautiful daughter whose mother, as a social worker, sent me and joined me to a fabulous family therapist during my divorce and after my divorce, where I and we three could work on my childhood issues. As a result, I am the calmer, happier person I am today. Raw therapy. James will say, what of LifeSpring? And I agree, that was huge. And Mom went and realized she had control over her responses to anything. So I got them, Mom and Dad without my brothers, to compete with for 14 years, living in Maryland. Since Grandma passed, I had 14 years, to myself, the two of them. Mom often planned the weekend, my once-a-month visits, and I felt like I was going to a spa. Sleep in, eat at restaurants, see a play or a movie, go to a party with her wonderful friends. I fell in love with them both. As good friends. And I'm sad my brothers didn't have that. Joanne, who did the family history with Dad, a huge gift from him to us, said it best. Mom didn't want to be tethered, not to be doing her many activities. The cottage house worked because they were busy and out. Obama, oral history project, her projects, friends, family, conference meetings, and of course the Durr lecture, which I have taken on for her. She grew up when women didn't work, and her single aunts were at her grandparents' house since they had no husbands to care for them, because so many men died in the Civil War. Her mother kept looking for an occupation for her. Have a tea house, since she baked well. Run a tea house. She was at Hull House in the beginning of social work in the US, perhaps having been a little girl during the Depression when they were at a camp where they could fish after Grandpa lost his job. I'm not completely clear on the history, but she lived that time. Women's Lib happened, and Mom and her friends went from hating men to finding their way. Monthly, Mom and Dad fought about money. She went back to work, and we lost a mom to hack. But now, her retirement has been larger than Dad's, and long ago they found peace when they separated their money. Go out to eat, it's Mom's credit card. Vacations, Maine, Martha's Vineyard, Mom's money. So now I work and live on my money, and she hasn't pushed me hard to find the next man. This is the luxury and the lovely side and relationship I had with Mom. I traveled with them on vacations, first since I was poor and recently divorced, and then to help them find their way. We were a team. It was fun. Many, many years we drove to vacation together. And I love their friends. We visited. She took me to my ballet company, now famous and expensive. Dad, less and less old school, took on cooking to take care of her. He got more liberated too, because he loved her so much. She came a long way, baby. I love you, Mom, and I'm so grateful I had you to myself with Dad for so long. Sorry, bro. Cliff got a sense of this by being here of late. He's been amazing. I am glad I chose to live and enjoy live nearby and enjoy both my parents and as friends and as adults. And even in the hospital were some of the best times when I heard stories. Living close and becoming friends is a luxury most miss. Rest in joy, as Dad says. Mom, love ya, Nan.
Nan, thank you so much for sharing those wonderful moments. In Times Like These by Helen Steiner-Rice will now be read by Esther Williams, a dear friend of Anne and her whole family.
Welcome, it's so nice to see you. Thank you, it's nice to see you. Good morning, everyone. To me, Anne was all about love. That's the way I saw her. And I chose this particular poem to read in times like these. I chose this. It reminded me of Anne. Perhaps it didn't any of you, but me, it reminded me of Anne. I read in a newspaper back in 19 80, that a lady needed someone to help her raise her children and to help her around the house. So I answered the ad. And when I rang the doorbell, this tall, beautiful, blue-eyed, blonde lady came to the door. She invited me in. She was very nice, very respectful. She treated me like I was a queen right from the very beginning. And we talked, and she gave me the job. So I said, okay. I took the day, and then she wanted me for another day. So after working for her just 2 days, 1 day a week, the third time I went in, she wanted to know why I was there. I said, well, I thought you needed somebody. She said, why are you doing this work? I said, what work? She said, why are you cleaning people's houses for a living? Why don't you get another job? Do something different. I said, well, I was never educated for that. I said, I don't have any education that to get another job doing something differently. She said, well, if you had education, what would you like to do? I said, be a social worker. She said, well, how far did you go in school? I said, I didn't go to school. I said, I'm from Virginia. And I was born there in apartheid, and you didn't have to go to school. She said, you should go to school. I said, well, I don't like it because I'm old. People are going to laugh at me, and they're going to say things about me, and I don't want my friends to know, and I put up a front, and I pretend. Every day I went, you're going to school. I'm going to work with you to go to school. So every time I would go, we had the school conversation. So I said, well, I'd be better off going to school than having this conversation every time I come to work. So I finally wound up in William Penn High School. I graduated, thank God, thank you, Ann, when I was 46 years old. I was 46 years old. Ann spoke at my graduation, and I introduced her as my sister. She was that close to me, and she spoke at my graduation. Ann was all about love. She didn't care if you were spotted. If you were a human being, she treated you with love and respect and would like that in return. So I decided to read this poem for my dear, wonderful, white friend. Didn't matter to me because I was so dumb at that time when I met her. I didn't know white from black. It didn't matter. Except I knew that there were places I couldn't go and things I couldn't do. And I thought, well, we were born like this. It's the way it's supposed to be. And I could argue you on that fact. We can't do this like they do, and we can't do that, and we can't do the other. So anyway, Ann taught me better. So I'm going to read this to you. And remember, after I read it, Ann taught me how to read. It's called In Times Like These. We read the headlines daily and listen to the news. We shake our heads despairingly and glumly sing the blues. We are restless and dissatisfied, and we do not feel secure. We are vaguely discontented with the things we must endure. The violent age we live in is filled with nameless fears. As we listen to the newscasts that come daily to our ears, and we view the threatening future with sad sobriety, as we're surrounded daily by increased anxiety? How can we find security or stand on solid ground when there's violence and dissension and confusion all around? Where can we go from the rising tide of hate? From the rising tide of hate, where can we find a haven to escape this shameful fate? So instead of reading headlines that disturb and mine, let us open up the Bible, and in doing so, we'll find that this age is no different from the million gone before, but in every hour of crisis, God has opened up a door. And trust his all-wise plan, for God provides protection beyond that of any man. And we learn that each tomorrow is not ours to understand, but lies safely in the keeping of the great Creator's hand. And to have the steadfast knowledge that we never walk alone, and to rest in the assurance that our every need is known, will help display our worries, our anxieties and care. For doubt and fear are vanished, and the peacefulness of prayer. I would like to say at this moment to the Lyons family, of whom I'm a member, reach for the stars, and if you fall amongst the clouds, you are still on high ground. I want to thank each and every one of you. I love all of you. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you so very much, Ms. Williams. Now, Ann's sister, Tilla, will share some of her memories of her older sister.
My sister Ann. On February 7th, my eldest, adored, and beloved sister, Ann Patterson Durr Lyon, died 5 days shy of her 86th birthday. All of us gathered here, mothers, fathers, daughters, sisters, brothers, sons, aunts, cousins, in-laws, outlaws, and dear friends have come here to mourn and to celebrate the living spirit of my sister. Ann's physical presence is irrevocably gone, torn from the fabric which I and we once thought would hold our lives together into infinity. And then there is my sister Ann, as I, her sister, see her from a kaleidoscope of intimate memories. Close your eyes. See 3 blonde, blue-eyed sisters of assorted length and width, spooned together on a blanket, tickling one another's backs under a night sky lit by stars and fireflies. Another turn. Pass the kaleidoscope around, turn the lens and take another peek. Witness Ann teaching my sister, Lucy, and myself how to swim, play tennis, trek through the woods on rough terrain immersed in dappled sunlight. See us splayed upside down, sledding down Seminary Hill to the gates of Quaker Lane. We are now off to go ice skating. Ann laces up our skates, Make sure our mittens are dry before heading off to cleave graceful figure eights into the ice. Turn your kaleidoscope another notch. There Anne is under a cerulean blue canopy of sky, waving her arms up and down and printing angel wings onto a fresh blanket of snow. Watch how we younger sisters imitate the one who came before us. Indeed, we are determined to make our own firm angel imprint into all that is pure and white and heavenly. Another turn, shapes, colors, forms, and patterns morph year by year through my kaleidoscope into something that bears some resemblance to the landscape of the past, yet presents an entirely new vision and perspective. Here's my sister Anne returned home to her house on Seminary Hill with a new boyfriend in tow. She has been enlisted to babysit my sister Lucy, myself, and our new baby sister Lula for several weeks while our parents go off for an adults-only visit to old friends. We children march behind the couple singing, "Here Comes the Bride." Anne is clearly not amused and has no intention of marrying this young man because, quote, he can't make up his mind in what direction the wind is blowing. Later, she marries Walter Lyon. He knows the direction of the wind. Lula and myself spend weeks and summers with Anne and Walt in Accokeek, Maryland, the house on Ruby Road, Great Sprucehead Island, or the house on Clifton Road in Camp Hill, as we witness Nan, Cliff, Paul, and James' arrival into the world. Anne and Walt remain, for my sisters and myself, an oasis, a place where we are nurtured and celebrated as we spread our wings on a sometimes turbulent trajectory into adulthood. We learned that angel wings can disappear in a gust of wind. There was a time when the age of 86 seemed incredibly old to me and death was the end of a journey. But now that I am 73 and my sister is gone, differences in age blur, as does the direction of my own narrative of life and death. Truth, perceived once as finite and factual, has become fluid as I perceive my sister's story and my family story, not only through my lens, but through the lens of others. God, our higher power, whoever you are, may Anne know that she was a very good angel and that her positive imprint on this world will endure. Teach us through memory to keep our delight in making angel wings, ephemeral as they might appear to be. May we say wow as we fall in love with good food, nature, friends, flowers, and the best of our mostly decent selves. And thank you for helping us keep on keeping on. May we seek true justice and forgiveness, mindful of our own perfections and those of others. May we take the time to put our relationships to one another at the forefront when we are blinded by righteous conviction. Mend that which has been frayed so that the tapestry of family, woven in truth and love, failure and resilience, fact and fiction, will survive. We need to know that family, history, past, present, and future can withstand the ravages of time, the changing seasons, and even death itself. Goodbye, my sister Anne. Can't wait to see you in memory, dreams, or wherever you might be. Tilla.
And now Anne's sister Lucy will share some of her remembrances.
Thank you so much.
Tilla and I basically were the children of Anne. She took care of us. She was our other mother. There was no question about that in so many ways. She especially led us to believe to make the world a much better place. Anne's celebration that she wants today is the most of all of her children to not only love each other, to love them, but to love each other. Anne would never want to have no children behind. And she, as we see here, celebrate her family and all of her children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And now, son James will be here to read for Anne's elder cousin, Hugo Black, who wasn't able to be here today.
Hi there. This was sent by Hugo Black Jr., my mother's cousin. We are gathered here this morning to honor the memory of Nan Lyon. She was my first cousin on the foster side, and the next child born after me in our immediate families. We lived together in my grandfather's house in Birmingham, Alabama, and for the over 85 years of her life, I considered her to be my first and eldest sister. Anne was a natural-born leader and always a family girl. I never heard her turn on any of her loved ones, because she instinctively accepted people for who they were. If you were close to her in times of your worst trials and tribulations, she was there, never failing to believe that you would overcome. While I cannot say enough about her great big heart, selfishly, I am most grateful to Anne for introducing me to the love of my life and longtime companion, Bessie Graham Hobson. Anne and my wife Graham attended the Emmanuel Church on the Hill in Alexandria, Virginia. And one Saturday evening in 1946, Anne invited me, my dad, over to her house, along with quite a few of her fellow churchgoers, including my wife-to-be, for a party. I was smitten with Graham at that first night, as was my dad, I might add, who told me it would be next to impossible for me to gain the affection of a young woman as gracious, attractive, and intelligent as Graham. But I proved my dad wrong, and we married in 1947. Anne, of course, was in attendance at our wedding. I'm still pinching myself for how lucky I was to win Graham's affection. Graham loved Anne as much as I did, and as our family grew, we asked Anne to be the godmother of our youngest daughter, Margaret. Life continued on, and Anne and I were living far distances from each other, my family in Florida and hers in Pennsylvania. But she made an extra effort to keep us close by calling regularly, visiting when she could, and including my kids in her family vacations. All of my children developed very close relationships with her and the extended Durr family. Anne, my first sister, I will miss you greatly, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to find the best in my life. Hugo. I'd like to read one other thing that came from my second cousin, Martin Pesaresi, that I thought was quite lovely, and he was as well very close to my mother. Every moment Aunt Anne shared with me in this life truly has been a blessing and a joy, without reservation. Every phone call, note, letter, card, and all else she has shared with me at any distance has brought her stalwart support and sustaining love right to my side. Her belief, absolute faith, and unquestioning certainty that we would all get it done, however, wherever, whenever, and together. Aunt Anne's memory is enduring proof that the dignity, humanity, compassion, and limitless, unshakable determination of one person will guide us each all through any challenge, apparent impediment, illusory obstacle, to the true beauty and love for all are here to share. Farewell for now, Aunt Anne. I honor your memory. My heart goes out especially to Walter and every member of your wonderful and loving family, whom I have known as my own. God rest your soul, for it shall never be alone, ever with us and in us, with abiding respect, with all my love, grateful, always for the joys we have shared. Love, Martin.
And now a good friend and fellow advocate for civil rights, Richard James, will read a poem he's written for Anne.
The journey is over. Anne, vocal and passionate warrior for peace, wrapped in a blanket of principle. Her life journey is now over, yet her testimony stands for equality and justice. Like her parents before her, she helped the downtrodden. In spite of hidden dangers, she was not deterred from doing the right thing. And sometimes misunderstood by those whom she wanted to help, she continued to make a difference. She was vocal and stood strong when others would fade. With steadfast courage, this gentlewoman possessed the heart of a lion. And the vocal and passionate warrior for peace. Thank you for a lasting friendship. Enjoy the rest of your existence. And be assured that you will find the solution in paradise. The journey is over. I feel blessed to know Ann Lyon. Let you know how long I met Ann Lyon in 1967, when she was a part of the board of directors for the Cumberland, Dauphin, and Perry County Commission for Economic Opportunity. And I won't go through the string of projects that we worked on. There were many projects. Civil rights projects, history projects, political projects. Ann would tell you like it is. And if you didn't want to know the truth, or you needed something to help you to really swallow it, then you don't want to talk to her. Because she's going to tell you just like it is. She's helped in so many projects. And I want to say, to give you my condolences, but also to say we were blessed to have known her. And we celebrate the journey that she participated in. Just look at this group. There's so many people that she has touched over the years. And her words and her wisdom will continue to touch us all. God bless you. Thank you very much.
And now, granddaughter Greth Lyon is going to sing I'll Be Seeing You, written by Billie Holiday.
Wow, there's a lot of you. Hi, I'm Greth. I'm Anne's granddaughter, and I'm actually a little nervous about singing this because the last time I sang it was at her and my papa's 60th wedding anniversary. And I'm going to try not to cry, but no promises. Thank you. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut tree, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
And now grandson Otto Lyon is going to play Nocturne by Claude Debussy.
I'd like to dedicate this song to Anne, or as she's known by the grandchildren, Granny Annie.
Thank you, Scott. It's beautiful. And now Walter has a closing thought to share with all of us.
Israel, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Amen.
Amen. Walter, thank you so very much. And God bless you always. Gwendolyn Bowers will now sing Amazing Grace.
I would like to say, what an honor and a privilege. I did not know this woman, but I knew my friend, Dr. Robert Scott. He introduces me to some of the most amazing people. I am truly blessed because I sing and I get to travel. I'm one of the children that was educated because of civil rights. Because my mother was a school teacher, was allowed to be educated. I learned to read. I loved books. I was raised in Iowa, and I longed to travel. I wanted to be a missionary doctor, but changed my mind. My music won out. Little did I know that I would minister to the hearts of people, and that was my calling. I know that I'm supposed to sing Amazing Grace, and I will, but I have a special gift for the family that I decided to sing actually while I was here listening to these wonderful things. And this is a song that was given to me in the night hour. Like so many of you, the Psalms speak to us. The word that was spoken and sung over the waters. Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thy changes not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. La-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Praise the Lord El Shaddai. La-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Hallelujah Adonai. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars with the courses above. Join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. La-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Praise the Lord El Shaddai. La-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Hallelujah Adonai. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thy changes not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever